Hey, today we're going to talk about Mayan civilization and other civilizations that are occurring in the Americas, over here in the Americas. Sort of separated and isolated from the rest of world civilizations that we have been talking about. Now, the Mayans are located on the Yucatan Peninsula. Yucatan Peninsula is a very small little piece of land that juts out from Central America. And on the Yucatan Peninsula, there's no significant rivers. Most of it is swamps. And so their agriculture, they grow maize or corn on these raised beds. They sort of dig up dirt and kind of throw it in the swamps to build them up, which produces this sort of natural irrigation for their crops. They're also separated into city-states, which were cities that governed themselves. And the largest of these were Tikal and Chichen Itza. Now, these city-states rule themselves independently, but they are linked by a common culture, alliances, and trade. And they're ruled by god kings, kind of like Egyptian pharaohs. They were considered to be gods and kings at the same time. And they also built very large pyramids for worshiping and temples as well. And some pretty big stone carvings. Now, the hierarchy was pretty simple. There were very few rich, a lot of poor laborers. Okay? And they developed a pictogram system called glyphs, which sort of tells us a little bit about the Mayans. Now, the Mayans were polytheistic, which means they believe in many gods, and each of these gods has a different purpose. Some of them are gods of war, some of them are gods of crops, of harvesting, of crowning kings, things like that. And so they would offer blood sacrifices to these gods. They would do this, sometimes they would pierce themselves and spill their own blood, or sometimes they would go out and capture warriors and kill the warriors offering that blood sacrifice. Right? And they believed the blood that was spilt would nourish the gods so that the gods could actually help them later on. Now, based on this religion, the Mayans developed a series of calendars. They developed a 365-day religious calendar that determined when to plant, harvest, crown rulers, go to war, and it all depended on which god was carrying the sun across the sky that day. Now, the Mayans had a mysterious decline around 900 CE, and historians don't exactly know what caused it. They have four ideas of what it could have been. One of them is an ecological catastrophe, a drought, a famine, or a disease. Another possibility is that they were invaded by other Mayans. They could have gone to war with each other, or they could have been invaded by smaller tribes from the outside. They could have had a revolution from within because there were so many poor people and so few rich people. The poor people could have risen up and there could have started a big war. Or they could have had a sort of doomsday prophecy, a prophecy about the apocalypse. They were very much into prophesying things. And so maybe it's a possibility that somebody could have prophesied this bad event and then everybody left the cities. So those are possible causes. Nobody really knows for sure. Now, there are a couple other civilizations that you need to know about. The Shaman, which are small agricultural villages in the Andes Mountains. And they also, they didn't really have any central political organization. Religion was the biggest organizing factor in their culture. They would come together to worship. And this was a big influence on the Incans, which we'll get to in the next unit. Now, the Nazca were a smaller civilization in South America, and they built these sort of long irrigation canals to bring water from a river to their very dry homeland. But they also created these really cool designs in the ground, which were hundreds of yards long. It could only really be seen from a plane. So here you can kind of see some of the designs that they made. Here's a monkey and here's a spider. They sort of had dug these trenches into the ground. There's also a bunch of hunting and gathering societies that are spread out throughout the Americas. But that is the Americas.